of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristero. Chapter 3. The Good Start. A week later saw the cafe kitted out, thoroughly inspected, and ready to open. Every official had given him a glowing report, despite warning him off his venture. Aizawa said, "Wouldn't you be better off somewhere else? Aizawa-san, my cousin has a wonderful shop in Tokyo, and she'd hire you in a heartbeat." Also, thanks to Midoriya Inko showing off her bento at the office she worked at, he'd even had a few people stopping by to inquire about his official launch date, menu, and prices. The sullen teenager, just call me Dobby, had similarly been showing up from time to time. He'd become his unofficial taste tester and had insisted, "Oi, make me some yakisoba and maybe I won't torch the place," that he made a selection of noodle dishes too. Not that he minded. They were relatively inexpensive and quick to make. Plus, Izuku and his mother had approved of them for a different style of lunch. The hard-working young mother had received her new cards, received compensation from the villain who'd been caught, and had insisted on paying for their meals regardless of him discounting her. And well, if this was the food the community wanted, that's what they'd have. He'd also purchased a great electric takoyaki pan. Serving up hot, quick portions of the savory street food would boost his earnings, and the batter was child's play. However, baking cakes was something he found particularly satisfying, so, as illogical as it might be now that he'd scoped out some of his potential client base, he'd woken up at 5, skipped his usual run, and gone downstairs to bake. The devil's food cake looked exactly as it should. It looked even better on the display pedestal near the till, too. God, was there anything better than a predictable outcome? Humming to himself, his hair tied into a health and safety approved bun at the back of his head, a jaunty black chef's cap, a gift from the boys he'd lived with. It had come in the mail the day before. It had a white paw print on it. Topping off the look alongside a similarly black apron over his black capped-sleeved t-shirt and tailored trousers. Shouta felt ready, composed and prepared, regardless of one of his former care center compatriots having asked him why he'd opened such a vibrant place for the community and dressed up so gloomily. Well, surely it was only logical, wasn't it? All in all, sure, black wasn't the most friendly color he could have picked, but it disguised most stains, looked professional, and in white thread he had the name of his establishment sewn, Noroneka Cafe, onto the top of his thick, fire-retardant apron to break the darkness up a little. The fact that the shoulder straps came out of carrier shapes had nothing to do with him buying it, though. Okay, the bread is nearly done. The bentos are chilled. The coffee is brewing. He was not doing the ridiculous half-fat, half-skinned nut melt monstrosities his classmates in Tokyo had loved. The ingredients were too expensive and full of chemicals, too. The menus are out on the tables, so... Checking everything over. He wasn't going to open until 7, so we had half an hour's respite. The 21-year-old looked to the wide, morning-lit windows, lettered in English, because modern people liked that, and he was fluent in the language as well. Stray Cat Cafe stood out in white on one window, red the other, and yellow on the final pane. It looked better than he'd ever hoped. However, he'd had to steel himself for this day. He'd prepared for the worst, which was that no one would come, vandals would swoop and wreck the place, a villain would smash through the structure to destroy everything, and hoped for the best. He wasn't stupid. He'd calculated the risks, and sadly his naysayers could be right. The venture was probably doomed to fail. It wouldn't make a positive difference. He'd be bankrupt with no family to support him. However, he'd tried his best to plan for that and not burned any of the bridges he'd made in the cafes, colleges, and dojos he'd worked in. Which should mean that he had a few outs to take should he need them, but he wanted this to work! He needed the gold to keep his head above water. He needed this hope to keep going in a world that had nearly swallowed him up and forgotten all about him and the boys he'd grown up with. If he could make a difference to them and their lives, then he could damn well help other people too. Blinking out of his thoughts, he often wandered into them when he was cleaning. If he polished the in-cafe drinking mugs anymore, he'd be rubbing off the enamel, wouldn't he? Shouta looked to the cafe's door. Reinforced glass fronted, the kanji for Noraneko and a painted black cat, his own design. He didn't need any copywriting drama. Stretching under it. Standing there, her red eyes looking around, was the woman who often looked after Izuku when Inko had to work late, her right hand waving at him enthusiastically, while her child peered up at him, his grumpy little face distinctly unimpressed. Huh. The opening times were listed on the door, but he shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth, should he? Putting down the mug, he pushed the privacy hatch out of his way, stepped into the cafe proper, and unlocked the door.
Ah, Aizawa!
The woman greeted, her hand snagging his and giving it a firm shake.
Oh, I've been looking forward to meeting you in person, she continued. Inko-san has just been raving about you,
she praised. She's very kind, he replied in turn, his hand pulling away with a wince. That was quite the handshake. As he returned to his place behind the counter, whilst the boy scampered to the long, wide display case, his mouth opening a little, whilst his mother leaned down to do the same.
My God, she breathed. You make all of these from scratch?
She asked, her tone disbelieving. Yes, he replied with a nod, his right brow cocking. Get you anything? Grinning excitedly, the ashy blonde winked at him before looking up at the similarly long and wide menu, her brows rising at the prices.
That's so reasonable,
she stated bewilderedly. There's no point overcharging people, Shouta replied. He'd often found it strange that eatery owners seemed to triple and quadruple prices. He wasn't greedy, he just needed to cover his expenses, and he wasn't sure why others seemed hell-bent on making money. It didn't make you any happier from what he could see. What would you like, Bakugo-san?
You already know my name, you darling boy. You must be careful, I'm a married woman, you know, she preened.
Watching her blush and fan at her face, the younger man felt his head tilting confusedly. Shit, had he accidentally flirted with her? So many of his classmates and colleagues over the years had told him that he seemed impervious and oblivious to such things. Relationships were illogical and unnecessarily complicated. Anyway, no thanks.
Oi, I'm gonna be late for school,
the child grunted, his arms crossed huffily.
And who wants to come on to you anyway, you old hag? Lousy brats!
She laughed, a light tap to his forehead, causing the kid to growl. Modern parenting. Goody.
Aizawa-kun, please excuse Katsuki's for manners.
She grinned before roughly ruffling those spiky jags of hair.
He's a chip off the young, attractive block, wouldn't you say,
Maybe he wasn't cut out to own a cafe after all. It'd be wrong of him to kick a customer out, wouldn't it? Crap.
Ma, you're so embarrassing. The angry imp snarled. Can we please just get some food and go already?
Amen, kid, he thought as the woman sighed before clapping her hands together.
Yes, she jeered. We'll take those 2 teriyaki chicken separals, 2 cans of Coke, a flat white coffee for me to go. Oh, those yakisoba boxes look good. I'll take one. I'm not devil's food cake.
She blinked, her English a little off. That's an American classic with a few twists I've added to combat some of the richness, he supplied mildly. It's a caramel chocolate cake covered in fudge frosting. Dark chocolate pieces are baked in, and there's 2 layers of cherry compote running through it, he described. All of the allergy information is listed on that card, and
I'll take 5 pieces!
Blinking. The woman hardly seemed the type to indulge in such things, although Inko had told him that she was a former pro-hero who still liked to train and calories were calories, weren't they? Plus, he'd not even opened yet, and already he was going to have 4,000 yen in his Smart Tills account, so Shouta nodded. Then, in a series of swift and efficient movements, he boxed up the cake, packed everything into a white, sturdy paper bag, complete with black paw prints, of course, and served the coffee.
Wow! The woman exclaimed. Do you have a speed cook or something?
No, he replied simply, whilst ringing up the order, his head nodding when her card was accepted. Thank you for your business, and have a good day.
Same to you, Aizawa-kun. Katsuki, stop being a brat and say thank you.
Thank you! The boy barked before, with a blink, they locked eyes.
Oi, Aizawa, is it true? Do you really make all my bedtime?
Regarding the child, whilst his mother added complimentary sugar and creme to her already milked coffee.
Okay? The eatery owner tried not to smirk.
I do,
he stated, his arms folding. Getting the little boot to ask was probably a step too far, but he'd not particularly liked his attitude. He didn't like how Izuku cowered away from him as he walked home, either. No, this boy needed some humility and a role model that challenged him with words, not yelling and flicking. Can I have one?
Yes, you may,
he said, his lips hazarding a grin when the kid blushed at the correction.
I make bento fresh every morning, so just let me know when you want one, and I'll make one for you, alright?
Oh, that's wonderful, the red-eyed woman smiled. Now, how about a proper thank you,
Thank you very much, sir,
the child said dutifully, his spite virtually gone in the face of such a treat. Shady opened the similar piece PR's team didn't catch wind of this and tried to sue him. Whilst he bowed politely, Shouta nodded back. We'll come by for it tomorrow. At the proper time, sorry. The former pro chuckled whilst handing him her business card, whilst he moved to do the same. We're just so excited to come by. Good luck on your first day, she added with her own bow.
Thank you, Bakugo-san.
Order Carmen Minsky, please.
God, Ma! Just shut up, will you?
Take your own advice, stupid brat.
Watching them go, a sweat drop or two dotting his temple, the eraser quirk user aside and looked back at the clock. Good luck, indeed. At 7 o'clock, a veritable rush of salarymen and women happened upon him. God, the coffee is good. Can I get another, please? He'd been almost overwhelmed. Were these people so short of good food and honest prices? Please tell me that there's more cake. I need something to sweeten my boss with. It looked as though every hard-working person in the area had come to him this morning. Double shit! He was having to take in more physical yen than he'd like. Why weren't people using debit and credit cards? But thanks to his stock and rational thinking, he was more than prepared to meet their needs. Aizawa-san, do you make lunch deliveries? Triple shit! He never even thought of that! The whole point of the cafe, of course, was to create a much-needed social space, though, wasn't it? Although he'd not expected to be this busy. However, as 9 o'clock rolled around, his bento boxes were gone, along with the yakisoba. Nabi would have to wait for more if he came by today. All of his fresh bread and sandwiches were similarly taken, and the devil's food cake, alongside the 2 gâteaux he'd had in reserve, was nothing but crumbs. He wondered dazedly as he placed the classic Victoria sponge with its glistening strawberries, powdered sugar, and freshly whipped cream out for any other patrons to view, if he'd underestimated demand. Because, hell, he wasn't in this for the money, but this was a better start than he'd ever dreamed of having.
Hey, not so old guy.
Offering the teen, who despite appearances had definitely taken a shine to him, a nod and a smile. Shouta gestured to the booth directly across from him for the border lounging.
If you want your usual,
he said.
That is going to take a little while.
He joggled.
I saw the crowds.
He snorted, his form, clad in similarly baggy but different, thank goodness, clothes, slumped into the bench he'd claimed for himself. You're going to need to up your game if more come by for lunch, aren't you?
Are you offering to help?
He asked, his right brow quirked as the teen. 16, he'd not talked about a family. He could take care of himself, you nosy prick. Blinked at him.
Ah! Well,
he pushed.
You're not wrong,
he admitted.
I've had time to restock, and I've made what should be enough food. For now,
he continued.
But I can't bleed in 2 places at once.
He shrugged.
You want a job or not?
The younger huffed whilst gesturing to himself. You're not scared that I'll frighten off your customers?
If they didn't want to be served by you, then they wouldn't be welcome here.
He returned pointedly, his eyes locking on the boy who'd been frequenting his establishment quite regularly for the past 2 weeks.
I'd pay the going rate,
he tempted.
Just think about it, all right?
Pho, you're insane, Dabby snorted. You don't know about the things I've done.
And I don't care either.
Shouta cut in, his eyes narrowing.
If you work here, treat the customers with respect, and help me to keep the place clean, then why should I?
He asked, his tone firm.
You're so much more than your past,
he reminded.
It's the future that's important.
What do you know? The flame quirk user sneered. You're a fucking saint or something? He seethed.
I'm no saint. He interrupted, a little chuckle leaving him. I'm just a socially awkward orphan who got lucky, that's all. he revealed. Sure, I've worked hard, and I plan like a control freak, but I'm nothing special.
He shrugged.
I just want to do what I can, while I can,
he added, their eyes locking.
And I wouldn't dream of patronizing you. I don't know who you are or what you've had to live through. I'm just a guy trying to run a cafe to help out people who've been left to rot in this place.
He shrugged.
I'm no hero. Hell, I don't even believe in the concept,
he admitted, the younger man's eyes widening as he spoke.
But I definitely don't believe in throwing people away.
He breathed.
You're not Dobby, he said softly. Regardless of whether you'd like a job here or not, you're always welcome, okay?
He asked, his smile strengthening a bit when the teen bonked at him.
So you want yakisoba, right? And a Coke?
Watching as the youth stared at him before looking away with a curse, his head nodding once. Shouta swiftly entered the kitchen, his eyes watching as the teen absent-mindedly fiddled with a soy sauce bottle left on the table of his prepared booth through the herb-planted dotted viewing hatch. One day, he thought, and hopefully one day soon, he could get the kid to open up a little more. He could get the kid to value himself. It was worth a try, wasn't it? The teen had been abnormally quiet that morning. He'd offered strained thanks for the meal. Still free, he was a kid in need and he wouldn't begrudge him for it. And then stormed off to wherever it was that he went. He certainly wasn't in school, yet you could tell by certain inflections of speech that the other had been educated to a good standard somewhere. His reading was pretty good, too, if the way he'd huffed at the teaching aids he'd brought was anything to go by. And from the looks of things was probably in some kind of social care, just as he'd been. However, he wasn't the kid's father, and he was too old to be adopted, which meant he'd just have to bide his time. With any luck, he could help to make Dobby's life better. It'd just take patience. Speaking of which, it was a damn good thing that he'd not seen his morning rush as a fluke. Between 12 o'clock and 14 o'clock, even more people had descended upon him. Some had grabbed food and drink to spirit away with. Others had slouched into his seating areas, their praise of the free Wi-Fi, because why wouldn't he, ringing across the room as they gratefully took their half-hour break to eat and rest. Hell, at this rate, he needed to double his stock orders, and his business cards were all but gone. It had felt amazing! He'd never been lazy, regardless of enjoying the occasional nap, and with a rigorous training regimen under his belt for the majority of his life, taking orders, waiting tables, and checking on the bathroom were a relative breeze. What was better, however, was that several parents had preened over the study area. Can my kid come back tonight? You're a registered childminder? Get that! And my daughter is going to love coming here. He'd be having at least a few kids in his cafe that evening, and all of them would have their pick of a discounted meal so long as they studied and finished their homework. It was probably irrational to be pleased by such a thing, but this was the difference he'd ultimately wanted to make. There was nothing more satisfying than realizing this goal.